Hi, everybody. Welcome to English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And today we're going to continue talking about the passage of the author E.M. Forster to India, his adventure in India, and how he came to be a novelist and stuff like that. We did summarize our featured novel, A Passage to India, in our last program, but today we're going to talk specifically about the author himself.
Right, we're going to learn about his background, how he was raised, what his family was like, what kind of student he was.
Before we say anything about the author, we've got some text here to talk about. So let's read the text of today's lesson aloud right now, and then we'll come back to talk about it.
E.M. Forster, the author of A Passage to India, was born into a middle-class family in London, England in 1879. A bright student, Forster attended Cambridge University, where he became a member of a private discussion society known as the Apostles. Many members of the Apostles, including Forster, went on to become a part of the Bloomsbury Group, an intellectual group of artists who rejected the habits of the bourgeoisie. After graduating, Forster traveled extensively through Europe, as well as to Egypt and India, which were still part of the British Empire at the time. Forster's observations and experiences from his time abroad appear throughout his novels. A Room with a View, which chronicles a group of English people traveling through Italy, was also a critique on the social norms prevalent in English society. Forster furthered this criticism in A Passage to India, much of which was based on his time as the private secretary to the Maharaja of Dewas in India. While there, Forster observed the racial oppression and cultural misunderstandings that divided the Indians and the British. His objection to these prejudices is obvious in A Passage to India, which explores the complex relationships between the two groups. Forster's writing style is most evident in A Passage to India, often described as his masterpiece. In the novel, Forster clearly exhibits his ability to see an argument from both sides and the sympathy he felt for each of his characters. As a gay man rejected by the society he lived in, Forster often bore witness to the prejudices typical of the time. His sympathy for the Indians, as well as his lifelong advocacy of people belonging to different social classes, races, and backgrounds, stem from his first-hand knowledge of discrimination.
All right, everybody, let's talk about the contents of our lesson for today. We're talking about E.M. Forster, the author of A Passage to India. He was born into a middle-class family in London, England, way back in 1879. So we know that his family wasn't really rich, but they weren't really poor either. They were a middle-class family. He was born into this family in the great city of London, England, in 1879. Now, a bright student, Forster attended Cambridge University, where he became a member of a private discussion society known as the Apostles. So, of course, along with Oxford, Cambridge is a pretty prestigious university in England there. So he was a bright student. He was really smart. He was on top of things. He was really on the ball. So he went to Cambridge. And while he was studying at Cambridge, he became a member of some kind of a private discussion society called the Apostles. Discussion is when you actually talk about things and stuff like that. This is a society which could be kind of a university club or something. So I guess he got together with other literature students or whatever, and they would discuss various topics like philosophy and medicine or whatever. They would discuss authors and poetry and literature, all sorts of stuff. And this group was known as the Apostles, which is a kind of a religious term, right?
Yeah, apostle usually refers to the 12 chief disciples that Jesus Christ had that followed Jesus Christ. But here it also can just mean a very strong supporter of a particular idea or cause. So they would get together and talk about what was going on in the world. Many members of the apostles, including Forster, went on to become a part of the Bloomsbury Group. This group was an intellectual group of artists who rejected the habits of the bourgeoisie. Bourgeoisie is French. Let's get to that in a minute. If you're in an intellectual group, you're somebody who is very well educated and you like to talk about high-minded ideas. You wouldn't be talking about the latest sports game or, you know, how the Yankees did against the Red Sox. You'd be talking about philosophy and art and big ideas that most people don't have enough time to think about because we're just, you know, busy earning our living and paying for our room and our board and just making enough to make ends meet. But these guys were artists. They were in a special class of people because they had access to amazing education at Cambridge. If you reject the habits of something, you say, I don't like what they're doing. And the bourgeoisie referred to the middle class, but it was the middle class who were very materialistic. You see this word a lot if you study China's history, where the communists were against the bourgeoisie, the educated middle class who wanted to live well, you know, and have nice things around them. And they, of course, in this group were against that as well. It sounds like they probably discussed a lot of ideas relating to communism.
Or socialism or whatever, even capitalism thrown in there. So they rejected the habits of the bourgeoisie, the middle class. They were very materialistic about acquiring things and doing
Having
things,
wealth, yeah.
Having wealth and getting richer or something. Although they weren't quite rich yet, they were working on it. But after graduating, Forster traveled extensively through Europe, as well as to Egypt and India, which were still part of the British Empire at the time. So he graduated from university, and like a lot of students these days, they decide to go traveling before they go look for their job. So he traveled extensively through Europe. So he went to France, Belgium, Germany, Spain, Portugal, Hungary, whatever. He went all throughout Europe, traveling extensively.
Wow.
Which means you basically go all over the place. And he also went to Egypt to see the pyramids, of course. And he went to India. And those two places were actually still part of the British Empire at the time. Remember, the British controlled large parts of the world at one time, including good old Hong Kong, which reverted back to Chinese control in 1997.
Okay, moving on to the next paragraph. It says, Forster's observations and experiences from his time abroad appear throughout his novels. Here we're talking about a novel, A Room with a View, which I think some of our listeners have probably seen. It's a really famous movie. This movie chronicles or follows a group of English people traveling through Italy, but it was also a critique or a criticism of the social norms that were found in English society back then. So, as most authors do, you write about what you know. You write about what you've experienced and your own feelings and viewpoints. So, he had traveled a lot and had seen how other British citizens were acting in different countries around the world. In the British Empire, they had taken control of a lot of different countries at that point in history. Now, they've been kicked out a lot of those places by now, but back then, the British Empire was extremely strong. If you chronicle something, it means you write down what's going on. I see chronicle and I always think of a diary, somebody who writes in a diary or a journal every day and talks about what happened that particular day and, you know, just outlines the life that's going on. Well, this Room with a View actually is just a set of writings about this group that's traveling together through Italy, which is beautiful. And it also kind of takes a closer look at what the British citizens were doing, the English society, what it was like back there, and the things he didn't like about it.
Right, it's a critique, which is like a detailed analysis of something. It's similar to criticism.
Yeah.
Criticism is actually negative, though. That means they're saying bad things about it. But critique, not necessarily. So he was kind of analyzing the social norms that were common or prevalent in English society. Social norms, how you're expected to behave. Norm just means normal behavior, what is expected of you. You can do this, but you can't do that, etc., etc. And there are class divisions and all that kind of stuff. It was quite prevalent at the time in English society. Very common there. You had to recognize these different class systems there, or you could get into a lot of trouble.
Oh, yeah. So, Forster furthered this criticism in the book we're talking about now, A Passage to India, much of which was based on his time as the private secretary to the Maharaja of Dewas in India. So he did have a job, it looks like. I thought, wow, he just got to travel around. How nice. But he did have jobs as he traveled and wrote at the same time, it sounds like. If you further something, you do even more of that thing. So he kept writing, and his criticism was then based on what he experienced as he worked in India as a private secretary. The Maharaja is a title of some sort. Is it?
I think it's a prince or something.
Royalty, yeah. Maharaja. They don't have them anymore. But I remember growing up hearing about this Maharaja. It's an Indian prince. That's right. It's from Hindi, actually.
Okay.
While there, he observed the racial oppression and cultural misunderstandings that divided the Indians and the British. Before we talk about that, though, guys, this is probably a good time to take a break. We'll be back and continue talking about his observations.
大家好，欢迎收听 English Digest， 我是哈利。今天我们要阅读的文章是 Unit 15文学单元的第2天课程。在今天的文章中，我们将会阅读到小说 A Passage to India 的作者E.M. Forster 的生平以及他的创作背景。文章的第一段提到 Forster 于西元1879年出生在伦敦的一个中产阶级家庭。我们看到这一段的第二句 A bright student, Forster attended Cambridge University, where he became a member of a private discussion society known as the Apostles. 身为一名聪颖的学生，佛斯特就读剑桥大学，在那里他成为被称为使徒的秘密议论社团的一员。我们看到句子的中间有一个用 where 引导的子句，此句原来是 Forster attended Cambridge University, which he became a member of blah 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 in. 将关系子句里的介系词 in 移到冠带 which 的前面，当先行词是地点时In which 就相当于关系副词 where， 表示在 Cambridge 这所大学里。我们再举一个例子来说明。本来的句子是 The businessman bought the house which we used to live in. 这名商人买下我们过去常居住的房子。先行词 the house 是地点，关系子句里的 in 可移到 which 前面， in which 此时就等于 where。所以这句又可以改成 The businessman bought the house where we used to live. 而课文句子里的 where 前面有逗号，是因为先行词 Cambridge University 是专有名词，也就是当先行词有独一无二的特性时，冠带或关系副词前面要加逗号。例如第二段第一句的 which 前面就要加逗号，因为小说A room with a view 是专有名词，有独一无二的特性。文章的第二段提到 Forster 小说里面描述的人事物大多取自于自身的经验。我们看到第二段的第三句 Forster furthered this criticism in A Passage to India, much of which was based on his time as the private secretary to the Maharaja of Dewas in India.佛斯特在印度之旅中进一步发展了这个评论。印度之旅中许多内容是以他担任印度德瓦斯大公私人秘书时为基础。 本句的 which 是代替前面提过的名词 criticism， 但此处的 which 不可用 it 代替，因为 it 虽然有代名词的功能，却没有连接词的功能。如果用 it 会变成前后两个完整句子没有连接词连接，所以要用关系代名词 which。关系代名词有代名词的功用，同时也有连接词的功用，可以连接两个完整句子。要注意的是，因为前面有介系词 of， 所以代替的对象是事物时要用 which， 代替的对象是人要用 whom， 不可以用关代 that 和 who。 我们再举一个例子说明。 Jack has 5 children, 2 of whom are doctors。 杰克有5个孩子，其中2位是医生。这句的 whom 代替前面的 5 children， 并连接2个完整句子。如果 whom 要改成 them 的话，要用 and 来连接2句，变成 Jack has 5 children and 2 of them are doctors。
We're going to take a quick break. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay, everybody, let's continue with our lesson. Now, we were talking about E.M. Forster, the author of our featured novel, A Passage to India, and he was traveling all throughout Europe and Egypt and India, but he did have a job in India. He was the private secretary to the Maharaja of Dewas in India, and while there, he observed the racial oppression and cultural misunderstandings that divided the Indians and the British. So first of all, we've got racial oppression. Oppression that has to do with race. Are you black, white, yellow, etc.? So this was racial oppression. Oppression just refers to when one group of people are being very cruel and unfair to another group of people. They are being unjust and they're causing them pain and suffering. They're probably killing them and imprisoning them and torturing them and stuff like that. There was, of course, racial oppression in the United States for many, many years. During the years of slavery. There probably is still racial oppression going on to a certain extent. And, of course, this goes on all over the world as well. But, of course, in India, he was observing this. He was watching it. Hey, you know, those white British people are being pretty mean to those Indian people. That certainly is racial oppression because the Indians are not white people, so the white people are being mean to them.
There were also cultural misunderstandings between the Indians and the British. Their cultures were very different, and sometimes it's hard to understand another group's culture unless you really are pretty open-minded and receptive to what they're doing. You try to understand. Of course, some people are they don't want to understand. They just want to stay within their own culture. A misunderstanding is when you fail to understand something correctly. So that also divided the Indians and the British. His objection to these prejudices is obvious in A Passage to India, which explores the complex relationship or relationships between the two groups. When you talk about an objection to something, you talk about someone who has a problem with something. He disagrees with it. I object to this. I don't want this. I don't like it. And prejudices refer to when someone has a preconceived opinion. It's an opinion they have before they actually get to know the real situation. That's just not based on actual fact or what's going on or actual experience. I know some people who have never had a chance to live abroad don't really know what it's like to live within another culture, and they, sometimes they judge too harshly a culture because they're prejudiced. They think they know what's going on somewhere, but they really don't because they don't have any actual experience. There are still a lot of prejudices throughout the world. I know sometimes America gets called on this, or we get we get criticized for it, but every country has prejudices.
Yeah, basically prejudice just means prejudgment. When you basically make some conclusions about someone without actually having done some research or having come in contact with those people. So you have these prejudices, these preconceived ideas, and it's obvious in a passage to India that he objects to these prejudices, which could be occurring on both sides. But in any case, he explores the complex relationships between the two groups of people. He's probably mostly criticizing the British because they, after all, are the invaders there. They are the people who are controlling India, which should basically be independent and should never have been conquered by the British. But let's go on to the next paragraph here. It says, Forster's writing style is most evident in A Passage to India, often described as his masterpiece. So different writers have different styles, and if you want to know what kind of style he has, well, this is probably the book to read because his writing style is most evident. It's most obvious in this book. This is where you can see it in its best form.
Right. It's pretty obvious if you take a look at A Passage to India, what he writes like. So in the novel, he clearly exhibits his ability to see an argument from both sides and the sympathy he felt for each of his characters. So he tried to be fair to both sides. He tried to be open-minded and receptive to both their sides. And you can actually feel the sympathy he had for his characters. So A Passage to India is being described as his masterpiece, the best work he produced as an artist. That's your masterpiece. If you exhibit something, you show it. It could be an exhibit as a noun. It could be a public display of art that you can go see. Maybe you go to an art gallery or a museum to see a special exhibit. Here we're using exhibit as a verb, and it just means to show something so that people can see some sort of quality or type that you're wanting them to see. So he shows or lets you see clearly that he can see both sides of an argument, which is very fair. And if you have sympathy for someone, you have feelings for their situation. Maybe you've never been in their boots or you haven't walked in their shoes yourself, but you have feelings of pity for them. You can understand their situation. You feel bad for them if you have sympathy for someone. He had sympathy for each of his characters. Some of his characters were just not good people, like Adela, who falsely accused Aziz of sexually harassing her or sexual assault. But even with Adela, he tried to show her side and make her seem more sympathetic to readers.
Yeah, she wasn't a total monster. Later on, she realized that she was wronging Aziz, so she had a change of heart there. So I guess he didn't see her as a total monster. He probably didn't see Mr. Fielding as a total monster either. He had his good and his bad sides, and maybe even he thought Aziz wasn't the kind of perfect person either. So in any case, yes, it goes on to say, as a gay man rejected by the society he lived in, Forster often bore witness to the prejudices typical of the time. So at that time, of course, being gay or homosexual in England was a no-no. They had laws against that sort of thing. You could be severely punished if they found out you were gay. So he was rejected by the society he lived in, so he knew what it was like to feel like an outsider. It says Forster often bore witness to the prejudices typical of the time. Bore witness, that's the past tense of to bear witness to something. That means basically you witness something, you see something, especially if it's a crime or if it's something that someone is not supposed to do.
Right. So his sympathy for the Indians, as well as his lifelong advocacy of people belonging to different classes or races or backgrounds, it originated from, or it came from, or stemmed from his first-hand knowledge of discrimination. If you're an advocate of something or you have a particular advocacy you support, it means you totally support this cause, this viewpoint. It's usually a social cause that you're advocating for or supporting. suffering, and he understood what it was like to be discriminated against. Discrimination is when you treat a group of people differently than others based on your prejudices, your dislike or hostility towards a group of people, and it's not based on actual fact. So he understood what it felt like because he had first-hand knowledge. It had happened to him directly. That's first-hand knowledge. You're not watching somebody else's experience. You're actually experiencing it yourself firsthand. And to stem from, again, just means that's where it comes from. That's where it originates. So you could see that he could write about it because he understood how these people felt.
Yes, for example, I could say that John's interest in studying Swedish stemmed from his first visit to the IKEA furniture store in his neighborhood. He just wanted to learn Swedish so bad after he went to IKEA.
It's because of those Swedish meatballs everybody loves.
I think it was because of all the different names of the kinds of furniture there. He thought, wow, those words are pretty cool. I'd like to learn Swedish. So his interest stemmed from that. So indeed, his experience stemmed from first-hand experience of discrimination, people, of course, excluding him because he was gay, etc., etc. Okay, that brings us to the end of our lesson for today. Time now to listen to our Chinese teacher.
文章的最后一段提到在 A Passage to India 中可以明显地看见 Forster 的写作风格和理念。我们看到这一段的第二句 In the novel, Forster clearly exhibits his ability to see an argument from both sides and the sympathy he felt for each of his characters. 小说里，佛斯特清楚地展示了从双方面看待一起争论的能力，以及他对他每一个角色所感到的同情。本句的 exhibit 是动词，展现、展示、展览的意思，也可以做名词用，有展示品、展览会的意思。当做展览会的时候，就相当于 exhibition， E-X-H-I-B-I-T-I-O-N。另外，这句有一个名词 sympathy， 意思是同情。片语 have 或 feel sympathy for somebody， 就是指对某人表示同情。例如 Julie volunteers at a charity because she has sympathy for the homeless。 朱莉在一家慈善机构当志工，因为她对无家可归的人有同情心。另外，表示同情某人还可以用下列片语 have 或 feel compassion for somebody。 Compassion C-O-M-P-A-S-S-I-O-N， 或是 take pity on somebody， pity P-I-T-Y。 例如 I take pity on the refugees who have lost their family members to war。 我同情那些因为战争而失去家人的难民。以上就是今天的课程，谢谢收听。
That's all for today, everybody, but we're still going to talk some more about A Passage to India in our next program. I know you're looking forward to it.
Yeah.
So please join us next time. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.